Max Gawn, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well, and after a couple of interesting weeks, it's only getting more interesting. Round 15, the last of our multi-bye rounds. Best 18 for the final time in 2023. And just about 10 weeks left to go in your fantasy footy season. There is a lot to talk about, but joining me on this episode, I got fellow co-founder Rids. Hello, mate. How are you?
You caught me out, MJ, with the mute button. So anyways, I'm going well.
Oh, good, mate. Good. Well, that's interesting. No mute problems over to the other side of the table as MiniMonk is back on the podcast. Become a nice, strong trio this season, through the preseason as well with these strategy roundtables. Hello, mate. How are you?
Yeah, not going too badly. And yeah, it's good to be back on for another week. And we're almost through the end of the buys now. So here we go.
We are almost there. There is a ton of stuff we have to get to. I want to answer some of our Patreon questions. If you are a Patreon, you know how to be able to get those questions in. If you're not, the good news is for only a couple of dollars a month, you can join our Patreon supporter group. All the links are in the details of this podcast. You can join in on that. There's a bunch of players that I want to talk about towards the end of this podcast that some are getting a lot of conversational pieces, others are not. I want to drill down on those. Rids a few weeks ago introduced this term of bench hygiene, and specifically in AFL fantasy. We want to come back to that. Got to talk cash cows with you, limited trade formats. We want to talk about how you can position yourself for the next 10 weeks. We want to talk round 15 premiums. Yep, I know we're in round 15, but I want to talk about a couple of them. But right off the top, as we do right throughout these multi-bye rounds, we want to look at players that are coming off their bye and viewing them as potential trade targets. Let's talk about the Adelaide Crows. MiniMonk, maybe we'll start with you. Probably there's three that most people would consider as viable targets this week. Again, it all depends where your team is at. I'm talking Jordan Dawson, who's probably one of the best defender premiums that if you don't have short, he's probably a target. Rory Laird, he's given people multiple bites of the cherry to go and own him, so he's certainly an option. And then one that we've talked about a little bit on these podcasts over the past couple of weeks is Ben Keys. Which of those three or any other MiniMonk do you think is a target?
Oh, I mean, they're all in the conversation as being targets. I think the two that are very much in a way players that you should be owning from here until the end of the season are Dawson and Laird. I mean, Dawson's arguably a top 2 defender and at worst case is a top 6 defender from here to the end of the year across the format. So I think if you don't own him, up the top of the list of a player that you should be getting for this week. And I think the same can be said for Laird a bit as well. I think he's likely to be a top 8 mid from here until the end of the season. Where he falls inside of that mix is probably up for debate a little bit. He's been really good, but he has had his occasional games where he's, underperformed. Maybe he's gotten them out of his system, and we saw what he did in the back half of last year anyway. So if you got a player that can average 120 over a 10, 12 game stretch with the consistency that he had, I mean, we've seen it from Toronto in the first half of this season. He basically had it the second half of last year where you didn't want to take the captaincy off of him because he was just that good. So I think those two are absolutely, if you can afford to get to those players, by all means, go to those two.
Yeah,
but
you're not
I think
trading
you're right.
Unique for him, though, aren't you, though? That's purely just you're cancelling the matchup out in your league or your rank to do it.
Yeah, you are, but, you don't want to be going against either of them, I think, in a matchup. And that's the counterpoint. It's like you need to pick and choose when you're going to be going unique with players. And I wouldn't feel comfortable going against either Laird or Dawson because we know Laird has such a phenomenal consistency and the ceiling. And Dawson, as I said before, he's basically guaranteed to be a top 6 defender from here until the end of the season with the role that he plays.
Yep.
But the more interesting one is Keys. And it's a very risky play. And there's a few of them that are people looking at through the rest of this season and particularly this round as well. And we'll get to them a bit later, I think. But I think Keys is interesting because he's had that role change, but it's not just as simple as he's gone into the midfield. He's gone into the midfield to tag.
Yes.
And that's a very different thing. He's also gone into the midfield to try and relieve the pressure on some of the younger kids. And Adelaide's just had their bye. The kids have had a bit of a rest. Maybe they want to inject some run into them this particular week. And we look at the matchup and we see what he did against the Pies earlier this year. Round 7 against them at Adelaide Oval. He sat next to Dacos. And what did he score in that game? 44.
Not good.
His lowest score for the year. Oh, second lowest. Sorry. The week before he had a shocker as well.
Yeah.
But
point made. Yeah.
It's low.
Yeah.
And so that's where the risk comes. The risk comes is if you trade into him this week, you are trading into him knowing that he is going to be standing next to Dacos probably for 80% of the game.
Yep. I suppose the promising thing for people that are jumping into Keys is they go, oh, Dacos is trending more and more into the midfield, especially in second halves of games. And so maybe that's where they build themselves some maybe unfounded confidence. Might be a bit too harsh of a phrase, but this idea of, even if they move Dacos up the ground, that's where Keys will be okay. So I think it's a fair warning you're sounding, though.
Yeah, and I mean, he has been moving up to the ground, but you know which game he spent the most amount of CBAs in for the year? It was round 7 against Adelaide. So even if he's playing in the midfield, it might not mean he's getting good at scoring because his job isn't to accumulate the ball. His job isn't to be that person that gets the ball in to out or runs hard and gets the +6s.
Yep.
His job will be to stop Dacos having any influence on the game whatsoever. And if that's the case, it's perfectly within reason that he pops another 50. And if you're willing to accept that that's the case this week, but then by all means, you can trade into him. But if you're trading into him expecting he's going to get 50, why not look for someone else who's maybe even cheaper, has an arguably comparable break even, but might have a better role and a better matchup this week? So look, I think if you got onto Keys a couple of weeks ago, then by all means, you've made a great move.
You've already banked the points, haven't you? Yeah.
You've banked the points and you've banked the cash generation. And look, his break even's still pretty low across the formats. He probably beats it and makes a little bit of coin. And you can look to flip him next week.
Yep.
But he's not one that I'd be trading into this week with any confidence whatsoever. I think the last 2 weeks he's had better rolls, but against someone like Dacos who will try and run Keys off of his feet, it's going to be a low score.
Yep, fair enough too. Rids, let's talk about the Magpies. There's a handful of names I want to throw out there. There might be some more you want to jump into, but we could not have banged the jungle drums louder on Darcy Cameron, so let's not do that one anymore, but definitely he is
No, MJ, we have to, okay, for SuperCoach. We have to.
Darcy Cameron, let's stop on him before we get to the other 4 or 5 I want to get your takes on. Talk to me about Darcy.
Cameron has to be the number 1 trade in target this week in SuperCoach if you don't own him already.
That's a big call, so unpack that.
Yeah, so he's got history in SuperCoach specifically, and he's trending, okay? The fitter he's got since he's come back, he's trending more and more in the ruck to be a sole ruck. So there's every chance at some stage over the next few weeks, he's looking likely to be the standout number 1 ruck for Collingwood.
Yep.
So it's just trending that way. Everything's pointing that way. Collingwood are going to play finals, so they're going to manage a few of the guys through the course. But I don't think they're going to manage Cameron because
he's missed so much.
He's missed so much footy.
Yep.
So they're more likely to manage the Cox and everyone else. He has to be your number 1 trade in target this week if you're looking for an upgrade.
Yeah, I think it's a really fair shout too, and I think a pretty accurate call. So Darcy's there for multiple reasons. We've talked about him not just for then, but multiple podcasts and articles we've covered him. Other names I want to throw out to keen to get your thoughts on, Rids. Tom Mitchell's returned to some form, especially in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team. Might not be back.
I am more interested, MJ, and I just spoke about SuperCoach. I'm more interested in SuperCoach with Tom Mitchell this year than what I am in the other formats.
Is that more because of the way he's impacting rather than his bulk accumulation?
100% it is. So we can't, from game to game, we can't rely on him getting that 30 plus disposals that, what was it? We called him Pig for so many years.
Yep.
He used to feast on these dispersion, high arm tackle at the moment, his impact for Collingwood from a footy perspective is massive. Enormous. And we've seen it reflect in his SuperCoach scoring. Now, again, it's not at the top echelon of mids.
No.
But if you're looking for a cheaper M8 option to complete your midfields, let's say M7, because I know there's another guy we'll talk about later that's going to be cheaper at M8. But he's got to be right at the top of your list to consider.
Yeah, I think he should. Dacos is another name. I think most have him, so it's probably not worth too much of a conversation, but him, De Goey...
Oh, well, I think it is a conversation because I think at this point in time, okay, I have lived without him for 15 rounds. What are you playing for now? Is it a league focus? Sure. Is it a cash? Is it like, if it's for pure rankings? Yeah, okay, maybe you end up trading into him, but he's not exactly representative of value anymore.
No.
So, and I don't know whether he's absolutely at the top end of that defensive line. So there is potential here that if you're going to trade into Dacos, you might be better off holding, especially in the limited trade formats, okay, a couple of extra weeks and then go to a Sicily, because we're looking pretty similar price points.
Yeah, and again, we just alluded to the fact about a tag that is likely coming his way in Ben Keys, and Ben's been one of the few players that's been able to prevent him to getting into those triple-figure scores.
Yeah, but I think we've overplayed the tag to a large degree this year. It's not so much we have, but I think the community as a whole has.
Yes.
And we've sort of jumped at shadows, but we've seen the reluctance by coaches to do so. For a fact, like with Dacos, let's just lay it all on the table. Sure. Every chance Keys goes and stands next to him. But the venue is the MCG, which is a monster ground. Dacos plays forward, mid, defence, wherever. So even if you're having a negative impact on his game anyway, he's likely to find another avenue to score points or score goals or whatever else anyways. And that might be just taking kick-ins. So there's a lot of avenues. There's a lot of if and buts. I think I've got question marks around whether I believe Keys can keep up with Dacos anyway on such a big ground. I know he's done a great job a few weeks ago. So be nervous about trading into him, but also don't overstate the nervous, because it is only really a one-match game.
Sure. No, that's a fair shout too. What about a De Goey or Crisp? Have they got any interest to you, or is they very narrow daily fantasy and draft focus for you, Rids?
It'd be useful if De Goey was going to be playing the next two games.
Well, that's
true. Isn't he
hard.
Still suspended for that Hewitt hit?
Yep.
So
he's got another two.
So no, not that one.
I'm going to flip back. I'm going to flip it to make him relevant for this conversation, though.
Thank you.
Because De Goey's out, does that make Jack Crisp a 2-week play in AF? He's got a reasonably low break even. We know they play similar roles in the midfield. Crisp is more likely to cover for Goey's absence. So that may be a play. So yes. So De Goey missing may mean that Jack Crisp might be able to find those 100+ scores for the next couple of weeks.
He's cheap enough. He's got the break even. He had the game last week. It's not a bad option if you're looking for a 2-week play. Someone to consider.
If he's your way to get to a Clayton Oliver, who we know isn't playing this week. Yep. I don't know.
But even if it's a way to get to Callum Mills, for instance, because you're not quite comfortable trading into him, even a game returned from injury. Now, we don't know whether Mills gets named or not. Every indication he may be this week, but there is a chance he may not as well.
Sure.
So we just don't know. There's a lot of variables to it, but it might be the fact that you jump on a Crisp, you make yourself 60 or 70K for the next 2 weeks, you take the points, and then you go and trade into a Callum Mills at his lowest point and actually bank a little bit extra cash for it.
Yep, I don't mind that. Let's talk about the Bombers then, MiniMonk. Zach Merritt's been amazing for owners, especially over the past 4 or so weeks. So I know a lot of people are probably looking at him. There's another 5 or 6 Bombers I do want to talk about, but we should probably stop at him. Non-owners have been seeing him blistering. What's your take on Zach Merritt as an off-the-buy target?
Not at his price. There is absolutely no way you can be upgrading into Zach Merritt this week. He's $620,000 in SuperCoach, and he's nearly $1 million in AFL Fantasy, and he's over $1 million in DreamTeam. But you look at who he's faced in his last 4 games. He's played Richmond, West Coast, North Melbourne, and Carlton.
That's amazing.
It's about as friendly as a run you can get. And even in the Carlton game, he had to get clamped after quarter time because he got clamped in that game. And he got clamped in the North game. He got a bit of attention in the West Coast game as well, and he just blistered it. But the thing is that you don't get him for those 4 games.
No.
And look at what's coming up. You know, the next few matches aren't easy. You've got Freo, Port Adelaide, and Geelong.
Oh, that's as bad as it gets for him. Yeah.
So what you do is you wait. I mean, in limited trades, you can't wait. In limited trades, you got to go. But I would be looking elsewhere and trying to save the cash. But in AFL Fantasy, you can afford to wait because, yes, he does have a nice run to finish the season. You know, there's a 5-game stretch where you have the Dogs, Sydney, West Coast, North Melbourne, GWS. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
But the other thing is we don't know what's going to happen when Parrish comes back in. And we know that he is a much better player when he is the sole midfielder, and his output decreases when Parrish is in the team. If it's by 10 points, he's probably still a top 8 midfielder, probably at the bottom range of that top 8. Yeah. And so you probably will want to get him sooner rather than later. But not when he's priced at a price point that's, you know, over 120.
Peak. Yeah.
It's peak. You cannot afford to buy him, especially when his price is probably going to come down because, you know, next week that 158 against Richmond falls out of his system. Then a 111 falls out. Then a 155 falls out.
Yeah.
And let's say he gets tagged this week against Freo to a 90-odd score. It'll only be about 3 weeks and his price will be about 900K.
In AF, yeah.
Yeah. I think you have to wait on Zach Merritt. I can't advise buying him at 994K. And I think the same argument will apply to someone like Marcus Bontempelli next week. You know, despite as good as he's been, he is priced at $990,000. Everyone owns him as well up high. So if you're wanting to try and take the unique on, that's the way to take the unique on. It's the same with Merritt here. If you want to try and make ground, you say, look, he's passed, so be it. I'll buy him later on the season. I'll deal with that when I have to.
Yeah, it's fair enough. Other names from Essendon that maybe not as interesting to talk about, but we'll throw them through there. Parrish has all but been confirmed to come back this week from the club. So he hasn't been seen for 6 weeks, although he's got that same tough midfield matchup that you alluded to. Not everybody, but a lot of people that owned Hobbs already moved off of him at the bye, although there are still some truthers that are holding on for the fact of round 15. So he's there. I don't know if anyone would trade into him, but wanted to include his name in there anyway. Ridley and Redmond have both had some patchy, really good moments across different formats over the past 6 to 8 weeks, while Nick Martin, probably more in AFL Fantasy and DreamTeam, has probably had one of the better previous 4 weeks, but again, is coming into that same difficult run of games that you just alluded to. Your thoughts on any of those, boys?
Yeah, I think if you're wanting to take on the pack with an Essendon midfielder, I would rather, you know, pay 80K less for Parrish and AFL Fantasy. They've shown that when they're playing together, they have a pretty comparable output to each other. So I'd rather take that punt. But I think with the Essendon run, I wouldn't be going near probably any player from Essendon. I know that Martin has looked really good, but he's playing outside wing, and he played, I think, 3 out of those 4 games were at the MCG or Marvel.
And you've already alluded to how easy those matchups were in contrast.
Yeah, you just can't go there. Redmond and Ridley are a bit more interesting. I think Ridley, especially in SuperCoach,
I like that.
There's been a bit more of a freeing up of his role, and he is someone that you could look to go to in SuperCoach if you want to try and take unique and you think that he can match it with the top 6 defenders, because he has done it before and he definitely could do it from now until the end of the season. And Redmond's a really good player when he gets off the chain, but when he has to defend, it really affects his score. And so there's a lot of variation in it. But
matchup dependent.
Yeah. I think that SuperCoach, you can look at Ridley. AFL Fantasy, you might want to look at Parrish, but really it's probably just those 2.
Yep, I think that's fair enough. Rids, let's talk West Coast, I know it feels weird to mention them. They're not all upgrade targets, and I know we'll spend some time talking about Ryan Marich a little bit later on, but is it Elliot Yeo or bust from a potential upgrade option for us from the Eagles? Is he the only viable guy we should be looking at?
We should say that loosely too, upgrade option, I know, but just price points, he's actually still only a mid-pricer across all three formats, which kind of mind-boggling, really, because I think there's almost 80% owned in the preseason, potentially. Like, he had some crazy numbers in the preseason. Now, it's just fallen, the dominoes have fallen to the right moment in time where he's still actually very, very handy value-wise considering his price points across all three. And with those returning defenders for West Coast, like, it just seems like the timing is too good, Like, it's going to be a very hard ignore. I understand the ignore, the argument.
And is that more the body is the ignore you're seeing?
The body,
or is it about...
potentially is the number one. Well, it's not potentially, it is. It's the number one worry sign is the body. The fact that he's missed a large chunk of football this year just signals that worry again.
Yes.
Now, I think there's a lot of narratives out there around Yeo at the moment, fighting for his career, being very determined about. But the fact is, every player that wants to play football has those characteristics here of being determined, being serious, wanting to prove a point.
Yes.
The fact that his body's let him down so much over the last few years is really a massive worry. So it shouldn't be as big a case as, is he available? Yes, of course he's available. And that's across all three formats,
Agree.
Should I be trading into him? Well, that's going to be team specific again. And I know we bang on about this every single time we have a chat. Team specific. But you don't want two or three of these types in your team, especially in AF, because if you're going for ranks, there is a possibility that the more of these types you have, the risk profile for the team gets too high, and you're really at serious risk of just falling through the gaps.
And you're talking risk types, these in AFL Fantasy around the 600k-ish mark. So the Yeos, the Salems, the Himmelbergs.
And let's just think of all of those names, Radio. Himmelberg, okay?
Yep.
He's got role issues. Now, whether they're real or not, it doesn't matter.
Sure.
They're very perceived. Everything we've heard from the people in the know is they are playing him in defence. They're settling him in defence. I mean, we've even had people coming out in conversations saying, oh, no, we're going to look at settling him down in defence. But until push comes to shove, when one of their tall forwards goes down in a game of football, we just don't believe it,
Sure.
So that is a worry. Now, Yeo, body-wise, is a worry.
Yes.
Look at Salem. Body-wise, is a worry.
Yes.
Let's look at the guy we've just been talking about in Jordan Ridley. We have all been down this path how many times over the last couple of years? His role is a worry. We've also had that conversation now, is there too many mouths in the Essendon backline? So if you keep buying into these types and you get multiple of these,
and they're all wrong.
and you get it wrong.
Oh, boy.
That's a problem,
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good shout. Let's talk about the Demons then, MiniMonk. Unfortunately, Oliver holders, which I don't think there were many in AFL Fantasy. It was mainly Dream Teamers and Super Coaches that were playing a game where they were thinking, all right, 2 weeks is the best case scenario, worst case scenario. I bring him in and he's back at round 15 and I navigate some multi-buy around best 18s. This is the worst case outcome for holders now. So we don't need to talk too much about that in terms of.
No,
I think the holding made sense. It's a bit of bad luck. But do you want to talk about Oliver for a little bit while we're here?
I do think he merits a conversation because I do think that holders have been a bit unfortunate because he was fit and then he got a toe infection and then, it seems that toe infection has been more problematic to his body than initially thought and he's missed again this week. Hopefully for the holders, he's back next week, but it's not the week that you needed him. You wanted him this week to be able to navigate this round 15 bye.
Yeah.
But I also think we need to talk about Oliver in a more general sense as well because in the same conversation about Bontempelli and Merritt, the keen listeners might have noticed that I didn't mention Oliver's name.
Correct.
And there's a very good reason why I didn't mention his name. And that is because at high ranks, his ownership is basically zero.
It is non-existent. Yeah.
It is non-existent because everyone has jumped off. And this is the type of player where, yes, he is probably about the 5th or 6th most expensive player in the game in AFL Fantasy. And I think he's probably 2nd in Dream Team at the moment.
Yes.
In SuperCoach.
Yes, he's top 5, 10 in all formats.
Across the formats. But he is the type of player where paying up for him can be an option because he is unique and he has the ability to be able to take the game away from those who can't jump onto him. But the problem is his price tag.
Yes.
And I was saying before he was ruled out this week that there was a lot of people looking to move on to him. And, by all means, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your trades. If you want to go for Oliver because you really like him as a player, then by all means. But you've got to look at how you're completing the rest of your team because everyone's been using the buy period to cull off that money that's been on their bench. And by all means, it's been great. And people have been able to go on for the likes of, Sheldrick and Windhager, Dev Robertson. Lohman's been all right. But we've had some dead cows as well. I mean, Marich isn't going to make much cash. Buller isn't going to make much cash. Mullen's not going to make much cash. So if you're going for Oliver, if you're planning to go to Oliver maybe next week or the week after as well, look at the impact that's going to have on the rest of your team. Are you going to be able to make the last upgrades that you're wanting to make?
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to find the cash to be able to, fix up an M8 from someone like, a Will Day? Maybe you want to go up.
Sure.
Or maybe you've got a Ben Hobbs that you've got to take up to someone like a McRae or a Cornelio. Look at where you're going to find that last little bit of cash to force those upgrades because it's all well and good to get a midfielder that can do 120. But if you've got a player that suddenly regresses back to 70s and 80s that's sitting on your field still, that'll sting you just as much. Wherein you can take the haircut and go for someone that's a 110 maybe guy, like his teammate, Christian Petrarca.
Yeah.
100K cheaper. He's performed pretty well, even when Oliver's been in the team as well. I mean, SuperCoach, he's a phenomenal player. But in AFL
you could argue he's as good as, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, he's kind of slept on. He's only really had a couple of poor games this year. He had an 80 against Gold Coast and an 85 against Port Adelaide. Every other game's been above 90. Pretty good. It's a really good consistency for a player that's, just under $900,000, especially when we look at the options that are available this week and people are looking for those midfield upgrades.
Well, in SuperCoach, his lowest is 95, and that was round 13. And before that, his last time under 100 was round 2 in SuperCoach.
And that game was against Collingwood, who was, about the toughest matchup you've got going around.
Yeah.
He's a really consistent performer. He probably hasn't shown his massive ceiling game this year, but you look at the run that they have, especially in the second half of the season, and especially to end the season. The last 5 games are Richmond, North Melbourne, Carlton, Hawthorn, and Sydney. There's a world where you want both Oliver and Petrarca in your team for that last 5 stretch.
And there's Sakilda in a couple of weeks too. Yeah.
Why not go for the one that's playing this week that has shown that he's got a pretty good scoring history, and that's 100K cheaper?
Yep.
I think he's definitely one to look at.
Yep. I think it's good. I think we know the outcome of Gawn and Grundy without DPP. We've seen what Marshall has done. We've seen what English has done. We've talked about Briggs at numerous occasions, let alone what some others have done. So I'm not too sure there's much merit in talking about either of them.
I don't think in limited trade formats there is, but I think in AFL Fantasy, it's still a hard monitor on that DPP because he's still sitting in just underneath that 35%.
He's in the etching
marker.
Percentage. Yeah, he's within 1%. The only thing is it's the entirety of the year. that the DPP is figured in. It's not just the 6-week block that Champion Data make that allocation. So you're hoping for a 1 or 2 big gone forward heavy games to get you over the line. I agree with that.
And you don't trade into him as a result of this, but you monitor, and there could be a time in the back half of the season where it becomes viable. But yeah, not this week.
No, that's true. Last team I think that we haven't talked about, Rids. I'm keen to get your take on.
You missed Christian Salem.
Well, fine. Let's have a go at Christian then.
Do we want to go about him? Because he's been the forgotten man.
Have a go.
And Rids has been starting to get the jungle drums going in our group chats, but
get them going.
And so I might have to continue here. He's done 370s and then popped 100 against Collingwood.
Yep.
Oliver's still out, so Brayshaw's the one that goes into the midfield, which means that he gets the halfback role.
All to himself.
We talked about the run that they have. You know, they've got the Cats this week, but then they've got GWS and St Kilda. It's a pretty good run. He's got the break even. He's got the price tag. Definitely one to consider. You can look at him in SuperCoach and DreamTeam as well. He's not a bad player to round out your team at D6 with, so I think he's a player that deserves a bit of love.
It's very much like Yo, isn't it? At the start of the season, he was highly owned and highly desirable. And as the years gone on through, probably no fault of his own, the interest is gone. Rids, you mentioned this, having too many of this type. You're including Salem in that mix too, not too many of this mid-price mayhem defenders to... People would view them as finished players in their teams. I don't know if that's a fair shout, but is that your take?
But that's my take. But I would also, and this is going to probably not be great opinion, but I would also include Whitfield in the same category as Salem. Okay,
yeah, I think
because
so.
These are the guys that something just seems to happen to
always.
Every year. And if you go back on his Dream Team history and AF history, we're talking about a highly talented player that's only ever averaged over 90 in one season of football, which was 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But we know he's got a massive ceiling, and we know he can do small blocks, and it's just one of those delicate ones, yeah?
Yeah, it is. Let's talk about the Hawks then to wrap us up, because there's a bunch I want to get through. We're already moving nicely through this episode already. I think the one Hawk everybody wants is Sicily, who's not available to us for the next 3 weeks. And so maybe he's worth having a conversation about too, Rids. MiniMonk already alluded to creating this pathway and plan for some to make room for Oliver. Is it that same process with Sicily, or is it a bit different?
It's harder in the limited trade formats, MJ, because we're getting thin. Okay, we're getting light in trades. The further the year goes, we've had to probably burn an extra 2 or 3 in the last couple of weeks with the buys than what we would accustomedly use years gone by. It's just a little bit difficult this year. So it's almost with the timing now. I think there's 10 games of footy if you're playing this week left in the season. He's missing 3 of them. So that's 30% of the available games. It is a lot. So that means there's only 70% available. See how good I am at maths?
Not bad.
Is that going to justify having to manage your money, manage your trades to try and get him in for the last 6 weeks? Now, it's, again, team specific. I always say it.
Format specific too, yeah.
It is. It's just a delicate balance, because he's actually even peaked in price because of those monster couple of scores before he got suspended. So I often say the timing of the trade is more important.
Yes.
With Sicily, the timing could not have been any worse. Okay. With the suspension. A, he's peaked in price. B, he found his role and he was freed up in that role compared to the lockdown roles he was doing earlier in the season. C, we needed him for round 15.
Yeah.
You know, because guess what? We've got guys coming off the round 15 bye that might be comparable, like a Doherty, like a Caleb Daniel, like whoever it is, okay, that have come off their bye they can match it even from a week to week or a large stretch in this.
Yeah, 3 to 4 week stretch. Yeah.
So it's that's why I'm saying Sicily in those formats is hard. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I
in
think
AF, 2 trades, use them or lose them. This is going to become more and more delicate because I don't see the bench hygiene being maintained at the right level because we've just killed it all. We've just every single dollar
option
on the bench we've just let it dry. Yeah. Yes, we've got a bit of influx with Sheldrick at the moment,
Yes,
and
and
all
that's
the
helped.
stars aligned. That helps for 100,000.
Mm.
Chesser might help if he can get 3 or 4 games and pop a 60 or 70 here and there. He might make us an extra 50 to 100,000 that we weren't banking on.
Well, let me throw some other names. We wanted to talk about bench hygiene, but it's here. Let's do that. We've got Windhager. You've got Lohman. You've got Marich. You've got Buller. Johnson. Yeah, we could probably throw him in the mix of that conversation too. Talk to me about these guys in this whole idea of bench hygiene too.
So the idea is that if you're going to trade out of a guy that's actually a good option, you're trading into a guy with similar. Okay, so I think the buzz this week out in the groupthink world of Twitter for AF is Wardlaw to Windhager this week. I think that's pretty much
It's been very common, that trade.
Okay, so what we're doing is we're banking a chunk of cash, 100,000 or whatever
Give or take.
else.
Yep.
We go into a guy with the same scoring potential to a point. Okay. And we're trying to get that cash gen rolling again.
Yes.
Okay. Because Wardlaw's hit his buy. You know, he's got his break evens up into the 40s now. It's probably it's not so much going to dry up totally, but it is going to slow as we move. So this is the sort of move that you need to free up a bit of cash on the trade itself, but you're also kickstarting your cash gen. What we've been doing though this year, and what we've been trying to tell people not to do, was trade into rookies blindly before they've even played a game. Because what it does is it heightens the risk of them becoming deadwood if they don't get named after round 1. Yes, a lot of teams fell into a bit of luck with Sheldrick.
Sure.
Okay. But we've seen this over and over again. We've seen guys like, who is it, Fleeton. We've seen it with Roberts, who unfortunately got injured at the point in time. Drury is another one. We're seeing these common names still in teams, you know, and we're slowly tidying it up because we are able to sideways, but we're sideways in a Drury to a Buller or a Lohman who may not have, you know, the required job security to be able to make you enough to actually be worth it over the next 3 to 4 weeks, unfortunately. Because Lohman's only playing, and I'm not trying to make this sound bad on Lohman, but he's playing because there's a Gunston not playing right now.
Yeah, the clock is ticking till Jack can get himself back.
You know, and we often find that, Sheldrick had that little bounce because Parker was suspended, because Mills is out injured, because they were looking. Heaney didn't play last week. A lot of their mids, the timing was right,
Yes, yeah.
So it happened, and Sheldrick went in and done it. But guess what? Sheldrick's only getting 50% game on time at the moment. Time on ground, sorry. So that's the problem, is he's likely, because he's only going 50% game time at the moment, he's likely to be one of the first guys to make way when all the names come back. And we're seeing this week there's potential that they're coming in. So if you're trading into a Sheldrick this week, just be wary. You know, you're still going to make a bit of cash, which is great, but just be wary.
Yeah, it might be the 1 week bump that others have got 1 or 2 additional weeks of bumps.
And we
on top
only
of that.
saw it last week, MJ.
Yeah.
A Johnson got subbed off, you know, in the third quarter, late in the third quarter. And so suddenly he had the 90 the week before in AF. the cash gen came in. He made a 50,000 in that 90 score.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly the week after, he got a 30, 35. And really,
SuperCoach.
he got his whole role changed with one key in for Fremantle, which was O'Meara.
Yeah.
So we saw him playing that inside role against Richmond, where he was right in the heat of the battle.
Yeah, and played well.
He was tackling, playing well. One name comes back in O'Meara, and suddenly he played wing against GWS last week.
Yeah.
Now, the biggest fear about this isn't that he played wing. And I think I said it to MiniMonk through the group chats earlier in the week. It's just something didn't sit right with me with Johnson and being subbed. And yeah, 100%. He had a corky. That's great.
Sure.
But the thing that didn't sit right with me was he played so well to be then pushed out after one.
The role.
It was just one. And then suddenly it's like, well, this is the most important round of the year in AF, in round 15.
I agree with that.
We can't have this volatility in role, whether it's for a rookie or even a premium. We just can't have it this week because we don't want to be stuck with a 30 score, even if the guy's played well. There's potential he's going to score a 30, yeah?
Yeah.
So that's the problem we got.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about Jack Steele in a similar context?
I think we should. We were going to get to him later, but let's talk about Jack Steele. So lead us on, MiniMonk.
So I think that these two are very similar. And look, I think Wardlaw would probably be in this conversation as well if he wasn't on his bye. And so it makes him a very easy move out this week. 100% get it. I think if you've got him, trade him this week.
Sure.
Pure and simple. Let's just not beat around that bush with that. But let's talk about Johnson and Steele because most people were relying on them as a number for this week.
Correct.
And most people were pretty confident in Johnson being, let's say a 70 because that's basically what he's been about at since he's been in the team, full stop.
Yeah. Vested,
65,
unaffected.
70.
Yep.
Yeah, best unaffected game, 65, 70. Pretty good player. But yeah, as Rids has said, O'Meara comes into the team, he gets pushed outside. And look, I think it's also a bit, they said he got a corky. I tend to trust Justin Longmuir when he says these sorts of things.
Sure.
And I also think that they wanted to experiment a bit. I mean, look who went into the CBA rotation during that last quarter. They put Hayden Young in there, who hasn't attended a CBA.
Yeah.
I think for the entire year up until this point. I think he got 4 or 5 in the last quarter.
Nuts.
Which is really weird. I'm not sure I understood it, but, let him try different things.
Sure, the game is gone, whatever, yeah.
I don't think the game will be quite as gone this week against Essendon.
Agree.
I would be thinking that he should be held, at least to see it one more time. His break-even's 36. Worst case scenario, he drops another 30. If he loses 5K, but he provides you with a 30, that 30 points isn't too bad. You can trade him at round 16. The bigger problem is with someone like Jack Steele, who is bleeding cash and fast. And this is not just in AFL fantasy. This is across the formats. And it's scary because we thought he was going to be recovered. We thought the bye was going to help out. We thought that he was going to be all good. And it's the world's most confusing. Apparently he doesn't have a knee knock, but he does have a knee knock. And apparently it's Achilles soreness, but it's general soreness. And the club can't seem to set themselves straight about what's the issue with him.
Yeah.
But it's clear to onlookers, there is an issue. There is clearly an issue because there is only 2 games since he's come back from his AC joint injury where he has gone over 90 in AFL. fantasy.
And it's pretty comparable
Over
in
90.
SuperCoach. Yeah.
And both of those games, he recorded double-digit tackles, and they were both super contested games against Port Adelaide and against GWS. When the game is open, when it's free-flowing, when he has to run contest to contest, he looks shot.
Even on the weekend against Richmond, when the game did slow down because of the weather and the contest, he still looked a half beat behind the rest of the pack.
Exactly. And so it's scary because his break even has spiked. It's 130 and he's already down to sub 800K. I mean, you would look at him and you think, well, can I move him sideways or up to someone? But you've lost the cash.
Yeah.
He's down. So you've got 2 options. Either you do move him and you have to find a target to move him to. And to be fair, I think people that were trading into him off his bye were hoping that he'd be a top 8 mid. And I think based on the evidence that we've seen so far, that's not going to be the case.
Nope.
You can probably look to him at some point later on in the season. And yes, I know that they've got a really good run after Brisbane, but you cannot go there. There is just no confidence in his body.
Need to see something.
You need to see something to be able to go there. And so you probably have to consider jumping off. But then the problem is, what are you going to do if you do jump off? And where are you going? Are you going to a Mills, who also has a high break even and also is coming off body concerns, who we don't know what's going to happen? Are you going to go up? How are you going to go up? If you're doing Wardlaw to Windhager, is that going to generate you enough cash to get up to a Petrarca, a Crouch, a Merritt? Who are you going to? An Anderson even?
Yep.
Or are you going to go to another line? But most people are already running with 6, if not 7 forwards. And the defensive options, you're wanting to wait until next week because I think Rids talked about it before with Sicily. The other main target that people are looking for to go to as a premium is Doherty, but he's on his bye this week.
Correct.
So that's the problem with Steele. It's not that you don't want to get off of him, because by all means, if you own him, you do want to get off of him. But it's the question is, here's a number this week. If he pops a 70, yes, he's losing cash, but can you 70. Make other cash on it's the 70 points. If you've got 18 playing and he's 70 points at 18th, then by all means, they take that to the bank, even at his price tag, and then reassess next week. It's as we always say, it's team dependent, but I think that you'd have to be in a very, very luxurious position to even contemplate trading Steele this week.
Yeah,
I'll tell you what, I'm going to play the other side.
I was going to ask you to, please.
Okay. I just said a few minutes ago that sometimes the timing of the trade just works. It just aligns. Okay. So if you're a Steele owner and you can't watch him hobble anymore, okay, or you can't watch him do it anymore. And if Callum Mills does get named this week, that's a very nice matchup against West Coast. On a very nice ground that Mills goes well at, the SCG. There's every chance that Mills, the timing of Mills is really good. So that may be too hard to ignore, and it might just give you enough money if you are going to go a Wardlaw to a Windhager. But can I call out something? I want to talk about Windhager in a second, okay?
Sure.
Because it's driving me nuts, MJ. Last week, everyone in the world in AF couldn't be cooler on this guy. And I just couldn't understand why. He was playing roles. He did the right thing with that win against Sydney. He went and tagged Warner. Do you remember?
I do.
Then no one wanted to know him from a bar of soap. But the thing was, he went into the midfield and he tagged in the midfield. That was a good role, yeah?
Yeah,
but now what we're doing is we're jumping on him when he's got a clear number 1 tag option this week in Lockie Neal.
Yeah.
And he's become the bee's knees and the buzzword from everywhere. But why weren't we that interested last week? Because it's the same. Nothing's changed.
It's the same matchup, yeah.
You know, it just hurts my brain when we do this.
Because we don't look at that like that, Rids. We see the game and we go, oh, he didn't score well on Warner. So, but he scored great. I just don't get the community sometimes, mate, but I understand what you're trying to unpack.
Yeah, but it's nuts, yeah?
Yes.
He was
just
out
follow
there
the crowd.
in the first half, and he actually played good, and he scored the mid-40 points in the first half of football.
In AF, yeah.
And then he went and tagged Warner in a game that they won, and he was the number 1 reason why they won.
Yes.
Because Warner was best on ground at that point in time, and he stopped him.
Yep.
And because he only scored 25 points in the second half, and he only ended up with 66 or whatever it was, we don't want to know him.
It's nuts.
It's crazy, yeah?
Yeah, it is nuts. But the beauty for coaches that actually watch the game not just watch a fantasy or a SuperCoach score tick over, those that understand and follow narratives of why players are moved in game, when they watch matchups, when they see these things, these are the sort of coaches that always are ahead of the pack. If you ever find yourself stuck and not moving anywhere, whether it be in ranks, whether it be in your matchups, whatever it is, if you're like, I just can't move, chances are you might just need to check, am I just doing what the crowd is doing? Whether it's a week behind or following the pack there, because more often than not, anytime a coach is like, I just can't move, you're probably just moving with the pack. MiniMonk?
But just be aware that just because you're not moving these weeks doesn't mean that the movement's not going to happen, because
correct,
there have been some sugar hit trading going on, and we're going to be able to separate the chalk from the cheese this week and next week as well.
I agree.
If you haven't looked at your team and you haven't planned for this buy, it's going to hurt. Like I am seeing teams, like especially in limited trade formats, there are teams that are going to be chopping a donut no matter what. And on top of that donut, they're relying on players like, Marek, Fife, Dev Rob, Chesser in that group. Yeah. People are relying on the likes of Mullen this week as well to be named, and we know that that's not the case.
Yeah.
Even in AFL Fantasy, there's people that are going to be rocking 19 and praying.
That's a Loman, Marek, Chesser, JVR, like these are their 19, yeah.
This is the week where the wheat from the chaff comes out, and then next week we see who's actually going to be at a position where they have, 22 reasonable players on field. And, we've talked about these sorts of players through the bye. If you're running a Yo at D6 or a Dicey Cameron at F6 or a Will Day at M8 or D6 or something like that, it's not too bad.
Yeah.
Like it's fine as long as the rest of your team is all good. But if you're running, an Angus Sheldrick, a Marcus Windhager at F6 or M8, you're going to start to get caught out. Like people are talking about looping these sorts of players at M8 or F6 and relying on one of them having a good score. Well, you're just asking to be playing rookie roulette again. We've gotten through this time period. If you've sideways through the buy, then okay, maybe you're happy with how your rank looks now, but it might fall away. But if you've done the right thing for the last few weeks, you've done the upgrades, you've gotten the top targets that you wanted to get to, next 2 weeks is where you're going to feel it the most, because there are going to be some teams that just explode from, 500, 1,000 and gain 300, 400 ranks a week over the next 2 weeks. It's coming.
Across all formats. Normally we think the big surge comes in SuperCoach and DreamTeam with trades and injuries and things. I think you're right in AFL Fantasy with that bench hygiene that Rids has been alluding to, with this pain point that you almost more than anyone else, MiniMonk, in the community has been talking about, the pain that comes through a lack of planning and this buy round specifically. I think you bang on the money with
but
that.
I just want to also mention about guys like Brad Crouch, okay? Let's just talk about Brad Crouch more.
Because his love in AFL Fantasy over the past week, and even more so now this week, coming off 3 tons in a row, is scary high.
Yeah, but it should be high. But the thing is, there's a reason why it's high, and that's Jack Steele. No one could have predicted this year. So he's got that little bump. But the thing is, people have sort of passed on him the last 2 weeks at a much cheaper price point. He's now priced at a price point that I would say is right close.
It's bang on almost what he is, which is historically about 100 to 105 guy.
Yeah, so it was only 3 or 4 weeks ago that people were absolutely anti-trading into him, because
people were hitting the eject.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And people who were on him were telling everyone not to get on him. And now suddenly it's all flipped.
It's back on.
He's the number one most loved target over the last week.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a little bit mind-boggling, how this is working.
Yeah. It's fascinating to watch the community at work, how we process these things. We talked about this round 15 bit. There's still a few things we want to get to, but the beautiful thing is you guys have been covering off a lot of the stuff I wanted to talk on this episode. Round 15 premiums. We got 6 teams that we know we don't have available to us: Carlton, Port Adelaide, GWS, Richmond, and then North Melbourne and the Bulldogs. Team dependent and format dependent is always the caveat, and appetite for risk is generally the three caveats we always put on most of our advice. But I want to ask you guys this question. It might not be for everyone, but there could be some coaches that are looking at a genuine premium or someone they believed would be a premium that's on round 15 and on the bye. Who are the round 15 premiums we could advocate for? Again, team dependent, appetite for risk, format dependent, that we could say, yep, there's a narrative in a world where you can put them in the gun. Have you got any for me, Rids?
I think there's a couple.
Okay.
I think Sam Walsh is potentially one.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's not so much about Sam Walsh. It's about
him.
It's the club dynamic. It's how that midfield mix is working at the moment. Can anyone actually explain to me how the number one pick from 3 or 4 years ago, who's an absolute superstar of the competition, can't play on ball? Like, is it really that hard?
Yeah.
Like, so if you're got no confidence, I can't suggest to people to trade into him. I really can't.
No.
Like, I couldn't do it. So he's one.
Sure.
I think there's a more interesting discussion point, though. Now, we've got the North Melbourne guys, okay, that everyone's...
Sheasel Zeeble?
Yeah, whatever we're calling it these days. I think Bales has earmarked Sheesbull or something like that.
Okay.
The double Z's.
Double Z's?
You know, those guys, everyone's gone off them, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nothing's actually changed for either of them, but we've gone off them.
Yes.
Well, there's not.
There's been a week or two for Sheasel and Hall.
There's been little periods of games that they have, but when we've had the full contingent of midfield back in the team, not much has really changed, yeah?
I agree. I would say that their roles haven't changed too much, but I think that something has changed, and I want to say it specifically for Jack Steele. He looks like Jack Steele. He looks injured.
Oh yeah, but he's 100 years old. He was never. Can anyone tell me what role he's playing for the team? Anyone?
He's playing Seagull. That's his role.
On-field
coach. He's not even
coach.
doing that anymore. Like he's sort of like, well, I'm not going to defend, but I'm going to stand over in this back pocket and wave my hands around like a
and ask
bird
for the ball
and go, here, give me the ball, give me the ball.
It's like it's a chip. But I'd argue that has changed for Zeeble specifically.
Sure.
And so, I mean, this is probably a question that people have asked, you know, for a few weeks now, and it's probably still pertinent now. If you're trading one, you're trading Zeeble.
Yes.
Correct.
Oh, of course.
100% with you.
Yeah.
Because he does look injured. And I'm not sure how well people looked at the game last week, but his low score was because he basically didn't touch the ground in the third quarter. He was off the ground for 12, 13 minutes out of the 20 minutes of game time that was played.
Yeah.
And you know, we've heard that he's had a plantar fascia in his foot from a few weeks back. Maybe it's flaring up again. Maybe he is just running out of steam. He's got the old man body.
Yeah.
If you're looking for an opportunity to jump off those sorts of players, why not now? I mean, his price is still high. There's every chance that he's maybe a D7, D8, but if you're jumping onto a player that's got better, you know, is a healthier player, is less likely to get injured, then go for it.
So he can go, right?
Okay, sure.
But if you've got Sheasel, please hold him. Like, I mean,
agreed.
Now, yeah.
Like, I know that everyone's jumped off him a couple of weeks ago, which was fine because, like, he is a rookie.
It wasn't a wrong play to move off him.
It's definitely no. It's never been a wrong play because he is a rookie at the start of the day. We didn't pay that much, and now we're just reallocating that coin elsewhere to further better our teams.
Sure.
So that's not a bad play. Never has been. Never will be. It's perfect play. Okay.
Sure.
We do this year after year.
Fantasy 101. How you do it?
Dacos was traded out in droves last year.
Same thing. Yeah.
Same story. Okay?
And again,
it's just going to happen.
And again, trading Dacos, and I will die on this hill. Trading Dacos last year was not the wrong move, as much as people continue to say that it was.
I agree. Totally agree.
It never was. It never was the wrong move. But again, we got to apply these rules not to the name, but to the actual situation. high-end rookie-priced player that's made hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, has done his purpose to get you to that point in time that you can actually nail it, yeah? But there's one name, MJ, that's a very interesting discussion right now, and that's Tom Green.
Yes.
Because Josh Kelly's back. Cogs is playing midfield. There's going to be more kids going through there. We've already seen Callahan getting more and more mids. Like, I just think Tom Green, he has been amazing, yeah? He's been everything we thought.
Everything and more that we'd hope for as a preseason pick.
But I tell you what, if you're looking for a pathway to your Clary Olivers or someone like that over the last 6 or 7 rounds of football, he may actually be your pathway to get there with a very small spend associated. But again, it's got to be team specific. It's got to be watch the game of football. Because I can tell you now, I've watched Tom Green playing. He's playing the same game as what he has since round one. He's got the same role. He's not slowing. He's still running around everywhere like a headless chalk. 2 weeks ago, he got tagged by Liam Shields, which was a very, very low score. But that's where I'm sort of thinking, will there be more attention as we go deeper into the season? Because GWS has actually proven to be a pretty solid team now.
Yes. Yeah. No question.
So 3 sub-tons in AFL Fantasy for the year. Round 2 against West Coast, had Jinby stand next to him for the entire game.
Sure.
Round 13 against North Melbourne, had Shields stand next to him for the entire game. Beginning of the game, round 9 against Collingwood. Hardest matchup for the year.
Yep.
Look, it's a play. It's something you could look at doing, but it's so team specific. Because the other thing is that look at how many teams actually have premiums missing on their round 15 behind their midfield. And yes, you can DPP some of the forwards in there, but the only big one that's, let's be real, the only real top 8 midfielder that you could say is a top 8 midfielder from here on, aside from Green, that's missing this week is Bontempelli.
Yep.
You could throw an argument for Josh Kelly, but people don't own him because he's only just come back from injury. Walsh doesn't look like it.
Nope.
Butters and Rosie forward DPP, Toronto forward DPP, McRae forward DPP. But I think that's where the other ones come in, I think, is actually in that Dogs mix. And I think I've seen it, I've heard it talked about on a couple of podcasts. I think Bailey Smith is one that people can jump off of. I think he's done his role. I think it's pretty clear to see that he's not a top 6 forward. He's still worth a little bit. Just jump off and be happy that you rode him for a little bit. I think the more interesting ones are McRae and Daniel. Like, if we actually look at the roles that they've had through the season, they have been an absolute... Everywhere. You don't know where they're going to start. No. You don't know where they're going to start. Daniel's had 40% CBAs one week, 0% CBAs the next week. McRae's had 50% CBAs one week, 0% CBAs the next week.
And for no reason.
Correct. No narrative. No narrative.
No reason. And this is half the reason why they have the positional status that they do. I mean, Daniel's got forward status. Right? McRae got forward status.
Great.
But, if they're going to continue to play these sorts of random roles, if they're priced at 900K or near enough to that, why not consider moving them? McRae especially. Like, if we look at the guy, he had, a pretty good run for the last 5 weeks. But before that, it was a pretty bloody hard hold. If you were an owner of him, he looked pretty awful in the role that he had. And, if that's the way that they're going to play this year and the only reliable players I think that they have.
Bont and Libba,
Bont, Libba, and then English, because he basically plays like a midfielder anyway. How many dogs do you think you can own and reasonably say can average over 100 for the entire season? Because now Treloar's back in there as well, and he's getting 80% CBAs, and he looks great in there. Like, there is a world that Treloar is a top 8 midfielder from here.
For the next 10 weeks, I agree.
Yeah.
There's also a world that Libba may very well sneak into the top 8 or 10 midfielders.
And that's not just SuperCoach.
He's already been around the mark. And I think if you started him, you would have been pretty happy because he's been very, very good. But if you've got him for the ones that actually get the CBAs, it's English, it's Bontempelli, it's Liberatore, and it's Treloar. It's not Daniel, it's not McRae, and Daniel isn't got the distributing role anymore. That's gone to Bailey Dale, and McRae is playing off half forward. And so, yes, those 100 scores that he's got in the last couple of weeks have looked really good, and he had a really good game against North Melbourne on the weekend.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for someone to jump off at a top value, I'd consider moving him.
I don't mind that. I don't mind that. You guys have been awesome on this episode. You're helping a lot of people with premiums to look at who they should be targeting. You're helping people, making sure that they're targeting the right cash cows to fit their team's needs, both for this week and the next couple of weeks, helping them working through the sideways trades they might need to make. So you've been absolutely brilliant. Before we hit any Patreon questions, we're going to wrap up the episode in a minute. Any last minute things you want to help people through is, as MiniMonk is correctly dubbed, and I think Rids has echoed this similar, not just the most painful week for fantasy coaches, but one of the most important, if not the most important. MiniMonk, we'll go with you before we hit Patreon questions.
Before you lock in your trades for this week, have a look at how your team is going to look if you do those trades this week. Really just do a sanity check. Have you got 6 forwards, 8 mids, 6 defenders, 2 rucks that you're going to be comfortable playing on field? Or are you got a loop that you're going to be taking? But have a look. Please don't just trade into and say, right, I want to get, I don't know, Jack Sinclair, Elliot Yeo, and Jarman Impey this week, and suddenly end up with 8 defenders, and you've only got 1 defender who's a rookie that you can actually put on your bench, so you're going to have to bench one of those players.
Yeah.
Just do that as a sanity check. Make sure you're comfortable with it before you commit.
Yep. It's good. Rids, from you, any last minute reflections or advice?
Just be careful with your counting your numbers. Try and break it up. Call out your premiums, but call out the guys like the Marich, like, the Lomans, like the Chesser. Because, they may play, but what are we actually really expecting them to score for us?
Nothing.
But also go in and actually do your worst case scenario. So if you're trading into a Keys and you've got 4 or 5 of those other names and you've only got 18, and you're not 100% sold that Keys is going to score more than 50 points this week, just be wary, because that trade can be used to maximise your points on ground. Now, Windhager is a perfect example, MJ. There's every chance he's tagging Lockie Neal very
50.
hard, and goes and gets a 40 or 50 this week.
I agree with that.
Do not include him in what your expectations are for your best 18 scenarios, because otherwise you're going to be greatly disappointed. If you've got a Keys who does 50 and you've got a Windhager who does 50, and then you've got Sheldrick if Mills is back, and you're expecting 80s and you're getting 30s, and you've got a Johnson who playing wing, and you've got someone else, just manage your expectations well this week, okay?
Yeah, I think it's some really good advice. The good news is I've just had a quick look through our Patreon questions, and for the most part, we've pretty much been able to hit them. There's a couple of very uber detailed, like unplug someone from the Matrix, that are some very, very unique, specific ones. So I'll hit those Patreons up with a specific answer.
Oh, but MJ, I love those sort of questions.
Do you really want it?
No.
Craig, don't worry, mate. I'll hit yours. Corey, Benjay, we'll hit to you guys and a couple of others that have been sent to us. We'll get in touch with our Patrons and make sure we answer those questions. Rids, as always, a pleasure. Thank you for your work on this episode.
And that's nothing to do with Craig. That's just because I'm past halfway of my life. I just don't have much time left to deal with that. That's all.
It's all right, Craig. We'll help you out with that. MiniMonk, as always, a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
It's been a good one.
If you want to go and grab any of the other podcasts we've done right throughout this season, you want to go and check out the pre-season 50 most relevant or some of our keeper ranks, you can go, if you really want to, and check out all the podcasts we've released. Wherever you're streaming or downloaded this podcast from, you can find that. If you want plenty of early access content, hidden groups, or just to support the Coaches Panel, you can find all your details to become a Patreon supporter at coachespanel.tv is all the links, as well as in this podcast description. And make sure you're following us across Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. You can reach out to us individually and the Coaches Panel to be able to let us help you with your fantasy side.
So, MJ?
Yes.
Now that the buys are nearly over, what are we going to talk about next week?
There is plenty of stuff I want to talk about, because there is so much pain that we have self-inflicted and been unlucky with. And there is still over 2 months of fantasy football to go in the year, and coaches are at a position where they're treating it like there's only 4 weeks. to go. So there's plenty of stuff we want to help coaches through over the next couple of weeks. Those that have been wise, those that have made smart moves, those that have had a slice of luck, but who have mostly executed to plans and to skills and to preparation, even if they're not ranked exactly where they'd like to be, could storm significantly of these next 8 weeks, because there's been a mad rush for sometimes no real reason over these past couple of weeks. So yeah, man, don't you worry. If you're looking at your team going, I'm ready where I want. No. Yeah, there's a lot of work to do still over the next 8-9 weeks, and we're going to help you through it. So looking forward to being with you next week for another strategy roundtable. But from all of us here at the Coaches Panel, we wish you luck. We hope your captain and your vice captain absolutely go berserk. We do hope the cows you've got give you some love, and you certainly have all the luck going your way. Until we chat to you next week, good luck, and we'll chat to you soon.